Squats are hands down one of the most powerful exercises you can do. They work the entire body, legs, core, and even upper body if you're holding weights. Now, not all squats are created equal. I'm going to be showing you how all of the different types of variations can challenge your body in unique ways. Being able to master these variations is what's going to allow you to get the most benefit from squats, whether you're a beginner or somebody that's already more advanced but looking to level up. I'm Dr. Jess, I'm a physical therapist, and over 20 years ago, I became obsessed with longevity and physical movement. I was working as a personal trainer when I was in undergrad, and I discovered that individuals that I was working with in their 40s and 50s that had never exercised at all were struggling way more than individuals that I was working with that were in their 70s and 80s that had always had movement in their life, but just wanted a little bit more out of it. So ever since then, this has been my mission, is to really understand how can we get the most longevity and quality out of our bodies. The reason why I'm so obsessed with squats is because they are what allows us to move in all three dimensions in space. Meaning we can move in the forward plane, we can move in a rotational plane, or in a up and down plane, because we have that strength in our legs to move our body mass in space. This is great for everyday life, and we can make it that much stronger with that specific type of exercise of a squatting style motion. Now, squats don't just build strength as well. They also help to improve mobility. They improve your metabolism because you're building that muscle, and they're also going to help you sustain the control that you need with the muscles to surround the joints to keep your joint health as good as it possibly can be. So when I talk about a squat, first we got to talk about what does that even mean. So a squat is when we take our center of mass, which is around our belly button, and we want to lower the center of mass towards the floor. And so the technique for how we do this so that we actually use our legs to do the motion and not using our back or another part of our body is to do something that we call the head-hips ratio. So as my head comes forward, my hips come back. And this is what keeps my spine nice and straight, and it allows me to keep the load transfer onto my legs. So with the squat itself, I can do squats where I change, how wide my feet are. I can make them super wide into a sumo squat. I can make them a little bit more narrow. That's all going to target different muscles that I'm using. But in the big picture is that I'm just going to be lowering my center of mass and then pushing my center of mass back up. Now, when you're using squats in an exercise-based format, there's going to be 4 different variables that you can use in order to increase the challenge of the exercise or decrease the challenge of the exercise. So these 4 that I'm going to be covering can be used as standalone challenges, or you can start to get really fun and start combining all of the variables to get a nice complex exercise. So first, the variables. So we're going to be talking about base of support. So meaning what kind of surface am I standing on? Is it a firm surface or is it a surface that's kind of squishy like a BOSU? The other thing that I can have as a variable is my base of support, which is the width of my feet when I'm in the squat. The third variable is weights. So I can have weight in one hand, 2 hands, a kettlebell, a free weight. There's all sorts of variations of weights. And I can also vary the depth of my squat. So how deep am I going? All of those are going to be my main variables to play with. So first, let's talk about the surface that you're standing on. So when I do a squat, and if I'm on a firm surface like the floor here, that floor is going to be helping me stabilize. I don't really have to do a whole lot of work to stabilize when I stand on here. So when I do my squat, I'm going to push evenly through both legs. As I stand back up, I'm going to load evenly as I lower back down. Now, if I change my base of support to something that's unstable, so I could stand on a BOSU, I can stand on either side. It's just going to depend on what my goal is for the activity. So if I stand on a surface like this that's nice and squishy, now I'm going to have to actually stabilize to make sure that I don't fall as I'm doing the squat. So that little bit of shaking that's going back and forth with my muscles That's using the smaller muscles that are helping to stabilize my joints in space as I'm using my big muscles to push my center of mass up or down, and I'm going to be able to get more activation of muscles in the activity. That was a narrow base of support, I can flip this over and I can have a wider base of support, and the balance challenge is just going to look different than when I was on the other side, because now the surface is hard, but the surface underneath that is going to be moving back and forth. So I'm going to be using more of the muscles in my hips now to be able to control me being able to lower my center of mass or push it back up again. Another type of surface that I can use to challenge my squat to increase the number of muscles that are activating and change the load is using a yoga ball. So I can put a yoga ball back behind my back, and now notice that my center of mass is going to be further back than when I'm standing, meaning my belly button, right? So as I lower into my squat, my center of mass is much further back. It's going to load differently on the muscles in my legs as I'm doing the same exact squatting motion, but I'm not doing that head-hips ratio that I showed you before, where my head went forward and my hips went back. Now I've got my center of mass way further back, so it's actually more load on these muscles, which are my quadriceps, when I do the activity, and my glutes as I'm also moving my body in space. So it's just a little bit of a different variation, and all I did was change the surface that I'm using. Another variation that I can use is weights. So I can use free weights, I can use a bar. It really doesn't matter, it's whatever you have accessible to you. But when I add weight to my squat, it's just more work that my muscles have to do to push that weight in space. Now, I can add more to it if I want. I can load it down more if my goal is power. But let's say my goal has more to do with my upper body. Well, then I can add weight with the motion, and I can do a bicep curl. I can press into an overhead press and lower it back down. So now my squat goal is also including an upper body goal. So I'm increasing the power that I get out of my squat just because it's weighted, and at the same time, I get the benefit of upper body strengthening. The other thing with weight that I can think about is if I use weight just on one side of my body, I get a bit more of a core challenge because my body's going to want to side bend towards the heavier side, but I'm using the muscles on the outside of my core, my obliques, to make sure that I don't do that. So this gives me that core challenge, plus I've got the weight that weights my squat. I could bring my arm overhead, add shoulder stability, core stability with my squat, and now I'm really getting a lot of different goals met, all with one exercise. So that's how, just different ways that we can use weight to target whatever muscle that we want to target and get the squat to be that much stronger. And lastly, with weight, another variation that we can target is dynamic movement. So being able to coordinate quick movement in space that's weighted down. So kettlebell swings and a squat are going to be a perfect way to do that. So I'm going to add momentum. So as I stand up, I'm going to move that weight in space. And now this way, I'm able to coordinate quickly going down into my squat and my power to stand back up again. So that's the variation of dynamic movement that's weighted. Kettlebells are a great way to be able to do that. Another variable to discuss is the width of our feet when we're in a squat. So if I go really, really wide with my feet, I'm going to be very stable, so I'm much less likely to fall. As I do my squat, I'm going to be using the muscles on the inside of my legs, my quads, and my glutes to do the activity. So this would be more of like a sumo style squat. The more narrow my feet are, that's where I'm going to really be loading more just onto the quads themselves. And I have to be a little bit careful about where my knees are because I don't want to just drive a ton of weight to the front of my knees if I don't have to. So if I have 2 feet on the ground, I change my base of support wider if I want adductors, more narrow if I want to focus more just on the front of my leg. However, I can also stand just on one leg, and I can do a single leg squat. So that's going to work more on balance. And now my upper body and lower body mass is having to be controlled just with the muscles on one side of the body. So it's going to increase the workload significantly as I push into that squat. And last but not least, we can vary depth of the squat. So if I do a squat and I go through a partial range, that's fine. I can do a squat where I come all the way down to the floor and then I come back up again. So when I think of variables I can play with, it's really going to depend on what you're looking to get out of the squat. If a function that you have to do is to be able to get on and off of the floor and lift something like a child, a dog, who knows what, then you want to be able to squat pretty deep to be able to do what you want to do. Gardening, like picking up a heavy pot, that's going to be a deep squat versus doing one of these numbers and then everybody ends up hurting their back because they don't train functionally in their regular exercise movements to be able to squat in a deep manner. And this is how squats improve mobility, because when I do this, I have to have ankle range of motion, hip range of motion, knee range of motion to be able to get into this deep squat. So by adding some stretching mobility and then using it when you exercise functionally, you're going to maintain that forever. So now that you know the 4 variables that you can really play with, which includes your base of support, your surface that you're on, weight or not weighted, and depth, now it can get really, really fun because you start playing with all of it. So I could put a yoga ball behind me and I could add weight onto one side because I want to target my obliques. Let's do this. And I'll bring one arm overhead and then I'll really work on my core stabilization, my shoulder stabilization while I'm in my squatting type of exercise. So I can really start to play with what do I want? Like, what do I want to be able to do? And what goals do I have? Do I really want to make sure that my posture is upright and I'm really strong through my core? Then I'm going to do a lot of core challenges. If I really want to boost some upper body power, I'm going to add a lot of free weights to the type of lower body strengthening I'm doing. If you really just want more power out of your legs, add more weight so that you have more to push against. If you want to work on coordination and balance and a lot of like ankle, knee, hip, lumbar stability, add an unstable surface underneath you. And then even more so, if this starts to get easy and you're standing on this and you're like, man, like I used to be like all over the place when I was doing this. As most people start here. It's super wiggly. As you train, it gets easier. So then you start to add some dynamic movement, right? So you could do your kettlebell swings on your unstable surface so that you stay nice and stable through the hips, knees, ankles, all sorts of stuff that you can do. You just keep playing with it. That's the real answer. So when you're first getting started with squats, start with the basics. A solid head-hips ratio, control the lower, really get good with your form. If you don't feel super confident doing that, just standing out in space, holding on to something like a kitchen sink can help encourage that head-hips ratio so that you feel like you've got a reason that you're not going to fall one way or the other. So you don't want to be hanging on for dear life. Just hands are on the surface and it can help guide you and it'll help you be able to go deeper into that squat with confidence. And then you just decrease how much assistance you're using. So you might go from like hands down to 2 fingers down as you get more confident with that movement to 1 finger down to just 1 hand with 1 finger down, the other hand comes out, and then you just kind of get used to the hands come forward as you go into your squat, but you don't hold on. So that's a strategy I use all the time in the clinic to just get people confident and able to go deeper. Another tool that I use are TRX straps. So when they are holding on to this, it's going to really help people. I've got people in their 80s that can come down and come all the way down and all the way back up again. By holding on to this, it's really going to help keep the center of mass driving right through the legs
and not kind of going onto the front of the knees or any of the pain points that are pretty common. So hold on to the straps, straighten the arms back to the point where you're not holding on for dear life anymore. So that takes some trust. You just got to get used to that. Then you sit down and then push through the heels and stand back up again. And then you just go through those reps of getting used to moving through the ankle, the knee, and the hip through that full range of motion. And then you can start to challenge yourself by being able to, all sorts of variations with TRX straps. I can go deep, I can not go deep, I can start to be more dynamic. If I'm, want to be able to work on doing jump squats, I can transfer if you want to work on your single leg squat. A good way is to start with the TRX straps, get your weight onto one leg, sit back, and then that way it's going to be a great way to progress. So these are really good trainers for squats. And then all the other variables I told you about are also going to be awesome for being able to get that much more benefit from the time that you're already spending getting your muscles stronger. Now that you've seen this video, hopefully you realize it's not that scary to really be the one that's crushing it with squats, whether you're in the gym, you're at home, you're working out in a park, it doesn't matter. You just realize it can be whatever you want it to be, and you're gonna make sure that you're hitting your goals because now you have the knowledge for how to do it. So if you like this video, make sure you leave in the comments your favorite variation of squats so that way we can encourage that community of people to support each other and realize that functional movement is what's going to give us longevity and the quality that we're looking for in those longer years.